I'm Ali Abu Nerma with Nora Barrows-Friedman. Last week, of course, the Democratic Party formally nominated Vice President Kamala Harris as its candidate for president of the United States. And while delegates inside the United Center for the Democratic National Convention in Chicago heard speeches and held a roll call, thousands of people rallied outside to demand that the Democratic Party and the Democratic administration in the White House end the supply of American weapons fueling Israel's genocide in Gaza. During the convention, members of the Uncommitted Movement protested that the party refused to allow a Palestinian American delegate to speak from the convention stage. The Uncommitted Movement is made up of Democratic Party activists who had called on people to withhold their votes from President Joe Biden during primary elections earlier this year before he withdrew from the race. Some liberal commentators and activists expressed dismay at the Democratic Party's refusal to platform a Palestinian, arguing that this was inappropriate for a party that tries to portray itself as a big tent of diversity. Mother Jones magazine published a draft of the speech that the Uncommitted Movement wanted Roa Roman, a Palestinian American state legislator from Georgia, to give from the convention stage. In the speech, Roman unconditionally endorsed Kamala Harris, did not mention the word genocide, did not even mention that Israel is killing Palestinians and doing so with American weapons, and did not call for an arms embargo on Israel. The speech merely repeated the vague calls for a ceasefire that had already been made by Democratic Party leaders, detached from any specific action that the White House could take right now to impose an end to the bloodshed by its Israeli dependency. Even before the text of the speech was published, many Palestinians had rejected the Uncommitted Movement's approach, feeling that putting a Palestinian on stage would be at best an empty gesture and would only help the Democrats whitewash their image, while the party and its nominee, Kamala Harris, remain fully committed to arming Israel as it commits genocide. Why divert energy and attention away from the one demand that would make a difference? Ending the supply of bombs and bullets that Israel is using to tear Palestinian bodies apart around the clock. Ultimately, the party refused to allow Roman even to deliver a speech that offered unconditional support to the party leadership and made no concrete demands on behalf of Palestinians. The controversy underscored the ongoing battles among so-called progressives in the United States about whether to engage with the electoral system, and especially the Democratic Party at all. Joining us to talk about this now is Steven Salaita, a professor of English and comparative literature at the American University of Cairo. He is the author of 8 books, including a new novel that just came out titled Daughter, Son, Assassin. Earlier this year, he published An Honest Living with Fordham University Press. In his own words, it is a memoir about the ostracism and loneliness and alienation and vitality and joy and regeneration that comes of being loyal to the oppressed and downtrodden of this world. I'll just mention briefly that it revolves around his forced departure from academia in 2014 when Steven Salaita was fired from a tenured position at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign for his criticisms of Israel's massacre of Palestinians in the summer of that year, and then his return to academia a few years later. Steven, we're very happy to welcome you to the Electronic Intifada for the live stream, but not your first interview with us. And so we're happy to welcome you back as well. And you're joining us from Cairo.
That's right.
Hi, Steve. Good to see you again.
Hi, thank you all for having me. It's a real honor.
It's an honor for us. So let me just, let's start with the Democratic Convention because all eyes were on it. And I just talked about the controversy regarding having a Palestinian speaker. And the speaker that the Uncommitted Movement wanted was Roa Roman, this state representative from Georgia of Palestinian American descent. She ended up delivering her speech endorsing Kamala Harris outside the United Center in the street. And in an interview with MSNBC's Chris Hayes, she defended her speech, emphasizing the compromises she was willing to make in an ultimately unsuccessful effort to appease the Democratic Party. Let's just take a quick look at that clip before we get your reaction to it, Stephen.
Of Congress wanted to be able to vouch for a potential speaker, asked for some sample language, and we provided it. And the language that we wrote was meant to be in good faith. It included an endorsement. It included a call for unity. It included a personal story. The reality is, anyone who knows me knows I'm incredibly passionate about this issue. I am Palestinian. I have a responsibility for this. And so even though it doesn't call for an arms embargo, those are things we do work for. Even though it doesn't call it a genocide, we still try to capture the massacres that are happening. But at the same time, we understood that this was going to be a moment to show some good faith. And so that is what we were going to talk about.
All right, Steve, are you disappointed that that speech did not get to be made from the Democratic National Convention stage in prime time?
I'm disappointed that the speech got made at all. I agree with your analysis. It's I don't know. We're all tired. I don't want to, find euphemisms. It's a terrible speech. It's an embarrassing speech. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on, the person who delivered it and whoever was behind crafting it, but the final product was bad. And the explanation that we just heard is bad as well. I don't think that we who are concerned with ending this Zionist genocide need to be engaging in what's called good faith. What does that even mean? In this context, good faith means, as she explained herself, not mentioning the genocide, unconditionally endorsing Kamala Harris. These are not the demands that the great majority in our community, let's say the Palestinian American community or the Arab American community, the broader Muslim American community, agree with. It strikes me as a type of unilateral decision making that's not representative of majority sentiment in our community.
But isn't it like, there are people who say, but, just having a Palestinian on stage, especially when Donald Trump is demonizing Palestinians, that by itself is an achievement, just having a Palestinian being visible.
No, that doesn't move me. I don't care who they put up there. Having a Palestinian go up there and unconditionally endorse somebody who is co-supervising the genocide is not any kind of victory. We need a good politics. We don't need these shallow politics of representation. It does nothing for me. I don't really care. There are plenty of people who share some or much of my ethnic/cultural background, and once they get into a position of power and start doing this nonsense, it means nothing to me.
Yeah. Steve, the other argument that we're hearing a lot is that Trump would be worse, that Trump would erase Gaza from the planet. And so we just have to suck it up and vote for Kamala Harris. And when you point out that this is the Democratic Party, which has, as you said, co-signed, authored this genocide, they say, oh, well, Harris has no power. You can't expect her to do anything until she gets into office. This like very kind of exaggerated, almost like grotesque version of the lesser of two evils argument. Is there a lesser of two evils right now? How do we even start to challenge that just very perverse, symbolic statement?
I mean, it is perverse, and honestly, Nora, I don't know how to challenge it. I've been trying for a long time. You have Ali has people, at the EI, and a lot of other people have, and it's very hard to get that point across. But at this point, after seeing what's been happening in Palestine, in Gaza specifically, just the images that were shown not 15 minutes ago on this very program, and anybody who wants to talk about a worse situation, right, than actual ongoing genocide, right, really needs to step back and reconsider their ethical calculus and why they want to prioritize maintenance of an incredibly violent system, right, that always finds a way to perpetuate itself at the expense of those who are suffering, suffering tremendously the fallout of being on the wrong end of this incredibly violent political system. Trump Trump is horrible. Trump was horrible around Palestine, in his first term as president. Nobody is denying that. But to say that, it's going to be even worse under Trump is, when you sort of break it down to its assumptions and its constituent parts, and incredibly, tremendously offensive and insulting argument. It's probably there's a lot of tacit racism in that argument, and there's a lot of callousness in that argument. I don't even want to begin to try to picture what's worse than everything happening right now.
So, I mean, I have a question. I'm curious to get your reaction to a question about language, which of course is something you think about a lot. But I want to continue this thread and get your thoughts on this issue, because this comes up or maybe it never goes away, because it always seems like there's an election coming up in the United States, and which is still if no longer the world's only superpower, still the most significant country in terms of enabling Israel's genocide. So there's a sense that politics in the United States matters to the rest of the world, and particularly to Palestine. And many Palestinian Americans and Arab Americans, and many people who support the Palestinian struggle, feel committed to participating in this political system, even though both of the main parties are openly genocidal towards Palestinians in word or deed, or both. Is it your view that we should refuse to engage with either party? Should we think about third parties? Many people bring up the Green Party, or is this all irrelevant? Where should we be looking and acting if our goal is Palestinian liberation? I know you addressed some of this in an essay at your website that you just published, Steven, at stevensalaita.com, called "Let America Be Your Periphery." But just give us your thoughts on those questions.
For me, it's a difficult ethic to articulate, because I don't want to interfere with anybody else's civic process. I really don't. But I do think that we've come to the point where we need to take seriously the idea of non-participation, with withholding not only our votes, but our participation in the mainstream of the politics. That's where I'm at. That's kind of where I've landed, and we've been really hesitant. Those of us with this opinion, the few that we are, of really sort of pushing that narrative, because it tends to provoke people into a kind of anger and defensiveness, and I really don't want to be fighting with people. I'd say that as Palestinian Americans and anti-Zionists more broadly, if we are committed to Palestinian liberation, that we've gotten to the point where it's time to seriously consider withdrawing that participation, or at least having an open conversation about it, a serious conversation about it. What does it mean? What does it look like? What would the potential outcomes be? What might the optimal outcomes be? And we don't need to be shutting down that mode of thinking anymore, or ostracizing people who raise it as a possibility, because I don't know what we're left with. And I base this on a few things. This began before October 7th, but ever since October 7th, we saw people who were supposed to be, I'm not going to say champions of Palestine, although some folks conceptualize them that way, but people who were generally speaking considered sympathetic to Palestine, end up making themselves complicit in the Zionist genocide.
You can
Thinking of
name
AOC,
names,
I'm
Stephen.
thinking of
Oh, okay, go ahead.
AOC, Bernie, you know, Ilhan Omar has been weak at times. You know, she talks out of both sides of her mouth. You know, so sometimes, you know, she says something good, then sometimes she does something shitty, which to me means that she's shitty, right? Like there's no, you know, there's no binary here. You know, you're one or the other at this point. And I look at, I didn't even think he was any good politically. Jamal Bowman, they got rid of him. The party turned on him. Cori Bush, who I like better than Bowman, you know, I thought she had a better political record. They got rid of her also. So what are we supposed to be participating in if we care about Palestinian liberation? We need to think about these things, right? Beyond the idea of civic responsibility. Let's think of it in practical terms. What system are we meant to participate in? What place is there for us in this system in the face of so much hostility? Let's just say I decided, okay, I'm going to vote. I'm going to work the electoral route. Who am I to vote for? There are no candidates, right? And they've already shown that if there's a candidate that even gestures in the direction of sympathy to Palestinians, there's a good chance that the party machinery, right, along with the Israel lobby and everybody else, are going to conspire to get rid of them. So we need to think seriously about alternate forms of political, let's say, political practice rather than political participation in this sham of a democracy.
And of course, people were practicing that in the sense that they were organizing and mobilizing to protest outside and across the country. And now people are protesting, organizing to protest at the UN General Assembly when that starts in a few weeks' time. So those are ongoing conversations.